Hello and welcome to this session on parameters. My name is Colin Adler. I'm a sales consultant out of EMEA, or for EMEA out of London, rather. And I'm very excited to be able to talk to you about parameters today. So, what are we going to be covering? Well, we'll be talking about parameters. I'll first talk to you about what they are, why use them, and where and how you can use them. I'll go through a quick example of a case where parameters have been used pretty effectively, and then we'll go through several demos, starting from pretty basic to fairly complicated. I'll finish up with summary and leave you with a challenge. So let's get started. What are parameters? Well, Tableau parameters allow you to inject dynamic values into your visuals. So rather than using hard-coded values or constants, you can have dynamic values that are entered at the time that the visual is being interacted with. So new scenarios can be investigated and so on. Why would you do this? Well, the main reasons are by avoiding having hard-coded values, you can save time, you can save effort by not having to go and modify those things when your business conditions change, and you can foster reuse. So the same things that you've been developed can be used over and over again with new parameter values. An example might be we'd want to label particularly significant sales that we have, such as sales over $500,000. We can do that easily in a calculation. But what if things change? What if it's no longer the $500,000 threshold? That's interesting. It's something like $750,000 or $1 million. Rather than having to edit that formula, you can just have it based on a user inputted value and modify it. That updates the logic, and you don't have to go and change your formula. So where can we use them? Well, you can use them pretty much anywhere in Tableau. Really anywhere where you might use a constant or a database field, you can use a parameter instead. And how do you use them? Well, from the user's perspective, you can give these handy input controls. So you might have a slider for a what-if scenario, a calendar picker for a date entry scenario, or you might just have sort of a text box for when a free-form value could be entered. Now let's have a quick look at something that was developed with parameters in Tableau. So, would I be rich if my father, on my birthday, decided to put 10,000 into Dow Jones Industrial Average, saving for my education? You can see that perhaps I want to track this on the day level and can enter my birth date, which is July 4th. And the visual updates to reflect this. He worked in the head office of an oil company, so perhaps we're interested in those oil companies and maybe McDonald's because we added a lot of fast food. We can see we could do pretty well. Unfortunately, he didn't do that. But the point is, parameters allow us to ask these types of what-if questions. We've got a slider filter for the start date here. We've got a list of values for the level of detail, and we've got a numeric entry box for the starting amount. This would be a lot more work to interact with if each of these were constants in calculations. So let's go through some demos of the use of parameters. We'll start off with kind of like a hello world example. I'm going to show you how we could use a parameter to show a reference line on this chart and control the color of these depending on whether they're above or below the reference line. So here we can see the sales of some product subcategories, and this is pretty handy. But which of these did really well and which of them did poor? Surely we can see that some of these did really well as opposed to others like labels and rubber bands. But we might want to have a benchmark that defines which of these are good and which are not. So I'll recreate this I'll recreate this view pretty quickly. We start off with sales, sum of sales for the bars, and we'll have a look at this by product categories, product subcategories, inverted. And the first step now is let's show a reference line. Reference lines are easy to create. And I'll start off by showing a constant one. We'll set the reference line at $4.5 million. Now we can see the reference line directly on the visual. But what if that benchmark changes? Next year, we hope to be doing a lot better. So I want to drive this from a parameter instead. I'll start off by creating a parameter. We'll call this sales benchmark. And we'll make it integer or whole number field. And let's just make it, give it a default value, maybe 4 million. And I will have this be a number entry box. So the precise value can be entered by the user. So now you can see that the user can enter a precise value into this field. That's great, but it's not doing anything yet. In order to make the parameter value affect the visual, it has to be included in a calculation or something like that. In this case, we'll include it in the definition of this reference mark. And then edit the reference line. That was meant to be for the entire table, by the way. We'll reference that sales benchmark and show the value of it. Maybe we'll show this as a dotted line. Now notice that it's been updated to reflect the current value. When this value changes, the position of the reference line changes. That's great. Maybe we want to show in stark contrast which products have met that benchmark, which haven't. And that can be done pretty easily with a calculation based on that parameter that we just created. I'm going to start off by creating a calculation on that parameter. Shortcut to doing that, right-clicking on it, create calculated field. You see it's pre-populated with parameter. We'll call it exceeds benchmark. No secret to the naming, just use something that you're going to be able to decipher in the future. And we'll define this based on sales being at or above benchmark. This will return true or false for each and every bar on this chart. So this calculation has been populated into the data window. We can just move it onto the visual. You can see immediately that the bars that are above that benchmark are colored, those below are still blue. And of course, this affects, that's the same value. This is affected by the current value of that sales benchmark parameter. So a pretty easy example of being able to inject a sort of benchmark or KPI value into a visual. Let's have a look at a top-end example. Here we've got a listing of products. There's a lot of products here. We've got, well, 1,263 products. It's got a really long tail. Maybe we're not interested in having the view sort of become overly noisy by all of these low-selling products. So we just want to view the top view. And top end is pretty easy to do in Tableau, as it is. Filter by the dimension you want to do the top end for. We can select n being 10 in this case. We'll view that top number. But what does sales look like after the 10th item? They drop off a cliff, or a gradual decline from there. Maybe it's not always the top 10 that we want to look at. So I'll create a top n parameter here. Call it top n, rather parameter here. We'll call it top n. Data type whole number. Again, we'll pre-populate with 10. This time allow the user to enter array anything from, well, it's not really useful when you view only the top one, the first largest item, perhaps. We'll allow them to enter up to 50, the step size of 1, perhaps. And if we have a look at this parameter now, we'll see that it's got this nice little slider control. Now, how do we wire this up to the visual so it's effective? We can go back into that top n calculation. Rather than using hard-coded 10 value, we use a top n parameter value. And as we modify this, we'll see the appropriate number of items here. It's pretty handy, and we're avoiding hard-coding things into a visual, things that might change in the future. Let's move on to something a little bit more complicated. Here we've got a listing of sales by item. And in many cases, you may have a pretty long listing. In this case, it's not that long, but there are several items that are beyond the current view on the screen. We might want to have it made easy to view a particular item and have it stood in contrast with the other items so we can compare how they're doing side by side. So I'm going to create a control that allows the user to select one of the product subcategories, and it'll be highlighted on the view. Its value on the x-axis will have a reference line so that that can easily be compared against the profit values of these other subcategories as well. So the theme is create the parameter. We'll start off by creating a parameter, and I'll call this choose subcategory. This time, I'm going to make it a string value parameter. We're going to populate it from the subcategory field. Notice that all of the values for the subcategory field have been pre-populated as choices now. So when we show the parameter control, we'll see something that allows each and all of those subcategories to be chosen from. So this needs to be wired up to affect the view. Again, I'll create a calculated field here. Call it chosen subcategory. This will be true when the parameter value equals the current value of the subcategory, the value for each row in this horizontal bar. Because this is a Boolean, it will return true or false each and every row. So we can bring this into our view. This is the field that we've just created. And we'll use color to define it. So we can see that the product that we just selected, subcategory just selected rather, is highlighted right on the screen. Now if we choose something off the screen, we can't see it. And this might scroll a long way down and be difficult to compare in some cases. So we're going to show a reference line that makes it very clear what the level of sales, or rather level of profit was for that chosen subcategory. So I'm going to create another calculated field based on that parameter. We'll call it sales, or rather profit, of chosen subcategory. And it's very similar to the last one. But if current value of the parameter is equal to the value of product subcategory for the current row, we're going to return the profit. Okay. And Tableau is telling me there's a problem with the formula. That's because in formulas you need to choose whether your detail level or aggregate level, and all of the fields have to reflect that. This particular field is at the detail level, so I'm going to put that attribute formula around it. And we just defined a new measure called profit chosen subcategory that we're going to create a reference line for. So I'll add it to my view and refer to it in a reference line. And this will be for the entire table. We'll choose profit of chosen subcategory, show the value, and again maybe a dotted line for it. So here we can pretty easily see what the profit level for that category is. That makes it really easy to compare against all the other subcategories, whether or not they're on in the current view. And we can see that obviously it works for any chosen subcategory. So moving right along, our next one is kind of an interesting one, particularly from people that are familiar with most multidimensional analytical products. A lot of them offer the ability to do sort of focus drilling, where a dimension is drilled down on a particular dimension member rather than on the entire dimension. You can see in this current case, we're looking at product category and product subcategory for each and every member of product category. But the user might be, rather the designer of the dashboard, might want to offer the ability to look at only a single product category at a time. And that's often referred to as sort of focused drill down, if you will. So the first thing we'll do is we'll create a parameter that offers a choice of one of the product categories, and based on its value, show the appropriate subcategories. Start off with creation of parameter, and we'll call it category for drill. We'll make it a string parameter again, like the one a couple of examples ago. We'll populate from database field, in this case, product category. But this time I'm going to add another value, which is all. This is in the event that we want to look at all of the subcategories, regardless of its parent. Let's have a look at that parameter control. We can see here that it's got those 4 values that we've populated into it. Maybe we want to look at it as a single value list. So that's good. What comes next? How do we hook this up to the view? Well, again, we're going to have to create a calculation. Let's call this drill, or subcategories based on chosen category. Sometimes I'm pretty wordy. So there's a few conditions we have to handle here. The one is if category for drill is equal to all, in that case, we're going to do exactly the same thing as is presently the case, which is we're going to just show the product subcategory field. The next is if that parameter value is equal to the current value of product category, i.e. the chosen value of category for drill is equal to the current row product subcategory, In that case, we're also going to return product subcategory. And we could handle the other cases explicitly. In this case, just end the conditional statement here. So we've got a new field called, as before, called subcategories for drill, called rather a new dimension called subcategories, and we'll replace product subcategories with that. Notice that all selected, so there's no difference to before. But as I select, I made a mistake in my formula. This should actually be if category drill equals product category, because it's the category values that I've populated into this parameter. And we can see that only the subcategories based on the selected category are being shown. We can make this a little bit more elegant by excluding the nulls. And now we'll see only the chosen dimension member, unless we select all, in which case we see all the dimension members. And interactivity can be improved actually by putting this on a dashboard. In that case, this category for drill parameter entry dialog can be made floating and placed right above the product category column here. It makes it placed very intuitively. Keep moving along. I'm going to do something a little bit different from those types of calculations this time and allow the level of detail that's shown on a scatter plot to be chosen in a parameter. So this is great. We're looking at individual customer sales here. And that's great if our lens is customers, but what if they're products, or what if they're geographical dimension? So make it really easy for the user to select between these things. So we'll create a new calculation. It's becoming a theme here, or a new parameter rather. Call it level of detail. In this case, I'll do something a little different. I'll make it an integer parameter, i.e. a whole number, populated as a list, and have numbers that correspond to these customer name, product name, and city choices. So value 1, 2, and 3, and we'll have them displayed as customer name, product name, and finally city. And the list could go on, of course, depending on what we want to give choices for. Let's have a look at the parameter control. And why not, let's use a slider for this. Now we'll create a calculation that returns what the appropriate field is for the value that's selected in this parameter. Create calculated field, call a level of detail again. This won't be a name class because you're allowed to have different types of objects with the same names, by the way. If level of detail is equal to 1, then we'll do one thing, and we'll do the different thing for each other alternate value. I'll just copy and paste that same statement. I'm doing it's essentially a duplicate for each case. If we go back to my annotation, see that 1 should respond to customer name, 2 should correspond to product name, 3 should correspond to city. So what's happening here? For each of the possible choices for level of detail parameter, I'm returning a specific parameter. It's as if that parameter had been, or sorry, that field had been placed directly on the visual itself. Notice currently the visual is at the level of customer name. So if this parameter value is customer name, there'll be essentially no difference to the table. The difference will come in where a parameter value of 2 and 3 is chosen. So let's replace customer name field with that field we just created. It's called level of detail. Now we can see no change as we predicted, but when we select other things, the level of detail updates to reflect those choices. Now, this is a little bit ugly because our product names are pretty long. So something we might do here, just to clean it up a little bit, is go into the level of detail calculation again. Perhaps just truncate the slide again. Maybe we'll show the first 20 characters. That should make it a little less unwieldy. As you can see there, it's a little bit more elegant. So nice and easy and straightforward, and pretty powerful interactivity for someone that wants to investigate different lenses of the scatter, through which to view the scatter plot. Let's have a look at a table calculation in conjunction with parameters. Moving averages are ways of smoothing data. They're useful to use when you have very peaky, volatile data series, as in this case. And they're easy to create in Tableau. You'd simply use a quick table calculation. If we go into the table calculation that we write the average for, and we click on Customize to show the actual calculation, we'll see that the number of periods that the calculation, that the moving average is going back, is derived from this constant here. And this constant is driven from the moving average previous values field. So we can substitute this with a parameter. Anytime you see a constant like this, it's an opportunity to use a parameter. This time, rather than creating a parameter first, we'll actually do it inline in this calculation dialog. Click on the create button here. We'll call this moving average number of days. Again, whole number. And we'll set it to a week, being 7 days, but offer the ability to go anything from, say, 1 to 365, being a year. And now we have to replace this 2 with moving average. That'll work, but there's something a little bit out here, and that's that the context of that 2 was the number of periods back that the moving average you used to calculate to include values for, whereas we want to include the total number of periods. So we'll subtract 1, meaning that it'll go back by the number of selected days, less 1. Click OK. So if we show the parameter, we've got this nice little slider here. We'll see that as we change it, the line gets smoother, and that's because it's averaging a larger number of periods together, but it's calculating the moving average. Go to a full year, it's basically the entire data series averaged together. For one period, it is the same line as the original series. And this is useful because we might not know in advance what's the relevant number of periods to include in moving average. It depends on a whole variety of factors. Let's go on to the final example. And in this one, we're going to be looking at something that's quite different. This is offering some visual flexibility in the way that data is looked at. So in this case, we've got a couple of different views of data. We've got a map with our sales and profit, and we've got a scatter plot this is actually quite different type of information. So what I'm going to do to this is make it pretty much analogous, and we'll make this sales and profit, but we'll do it by city and country, how about, or state and country, rather. So this is sales and profit. Maybe I'll invert this as well, or no, that's the right way. Sales being on the independent axis, profit being on the dependent axis. We've got each of the jurisdictions that we do sales in, and it's pretty easy to see how they look in terms of sales and profit. It's actually, this Scatterplot carries more information than this map, but the map's pretty engaging. So these different kind of visuals have their purpose, their place in time. It's of course really easy to go and change a visual in Tableau. We want to change this map, for example, to a tree map or something, or a highlight chart or a tree map. We could really easily do it. But maybe we want to offer this capability to a pure consumer, like a Tableau server consumer of the dashboard. So how do we do this? Well, using parameters, of course. First step is to create a parameter. Let's call it scatter or map. Making an integer parameter and offer multiple choices to the end user. First, actually, let's make it a string parameter. Let's make the first one scatter and the second one map. These are two choices. If we had different more visual types, of course, we could add those here as well. So we've got a new parameter here. And if there's two choices, generally we want to show a single value list or something like that. We'll create a simple calculation that drives which of these is shown or hidden. We'll call this show scatter, because this will be true or false formula. And this will be true if scatter or map is equal to scatter. Right? Obviously true if scatter is selected, false if map is selected. Click OK. So there we go. And we're going to filter this time by the calculation. Since we want map not to be shown, we're going to exclude true. Notice this appears, but it will be shown if map is selected. And for the scatter plot, we want to do exactly the opposite. So we will show chosen the wrong value. Let's choose scatter, and we should see a value of true listed now. So this will do the exact opposite. We'll see map. We'll see nothing when map is selected. But we can bring these two things together in a dashboard to provide that dynamic showing and hiding that looks really elegant. So I've got a dashboard here. Let's start from scratch. I'm going to use a layout control, because layout controls, as the name suggests, gives you a lot of control over what's visible and hidden. Start off with layout control. And we'll add that scatter plot to the one side, map to the other side. Doesn't really matter which side. And get rid of these titles, because we don't want them to be shown in this case. And then perhaps we'll show that single value list again. Now notice when scatter is selected, we see the scatter plot only. When the map is selected, we see the map only. And this could be extended, obviously, to different kinds of visuals. This kind of provides user interface look and feel to the end user, that they can select different visuals, and it's actually modifying the visual representation of the data on the fly. What it's actually doing, of course, is showing a different view depending on the input. So that's all I had planned in terms of demos. The intention was to show you a wide variety of cases where parameters can be used, starting off with pretty simple, ending up with pretty complicated, showing you really sort of a rich set of examples that parameters can be used in. So to summarize, what are parameters? Well, parameters empower users with dynamic inputs that would be used to replace constants. Wherever you see a constant or a hard-coded field, that's a good opportunity to use a parameter instead. And why would we use these? Because they offer better interactivity and flexibility for end users. From a development perspective, they offer us better flexibility, reuse, and maintenance, therefore, so we don't have to go and update those constants when conditions change. What can you do with parameters? Well, sky's the limit. These are just some examples, but I'm sure the things I've seen in the last year haven't even touched the surface with what you can actually do with them. Where can they be used? It can be used pretty much anywhere where a field can be used. So in calculations, in filters, reference lines. And what kind of input types? You saw in the example I showed you that these things can be, you know, a real number, a whole number. They can be true or false, strings, dates, date times. Any session would be incomplete without showing a challenge. And this is a pretty complicated example. What it allows us to do is change the compute using characteristics of a table calculation. You'll see in this example, we have composition of sales by product category and product segment. The first choice is totaling these across so that the grand total column is 100%. Table down option changes the calculation characteristic so that grand total is 100%. And pane down has each of these in terms of contribution to the current product category. The solution is in the provided workbook, but don't hesitate to challenge yourself before looking at the answer. So thanks a lot for your time. Again, my name is Colin Adler, sales consultant in Tableau, and let's kick off the questions.